This is a 4-foot-long alligator, but it's not in the Florida Everglades or a Louisiana bayou. It's in a lake, in the middle of Brooklyn, New York. When you picture an alligator, you probably think of the American South, creatures of the swamp, basking on the banks of rivers from North Carolina to Texas. But a series of shocking sightings, hundreds of miles north of their established homes, are making people question that image. A gator under a car in New York City, another pulling national headlines in a Chicago lagoon. These aren't just urban legends. They are recent, documented events that force us to ask a critical question. So, what is really going on? To get just how strange these northern sightings are, you first have to understand the alligator's traditional map. The American alligator is a true symbol of the Southeast. Their kingdom is a humid, sprawling territory. Think of a line along the coast of North Carolina, draping down through South Carolina, Georgia, and blanketing all of Florida. From there, it stretches west across the Gulf states, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and into the marshy eastern half of Texas. But it doesn't stop there. Their native range also pushes up into parts of Arkansas and the southeastern corner of Oklahoma. Today, there are an estimated 5 million alligators in the wild, a massive conservation success story after they were hunted to the brink and listed as endangered back in the 1960s. Louisiana and Florida are the heavyweights, each home to well over 1 million gators. They thrive in freshwater swamps, slow-moving rivers, and lakes. They are an apex predator, and their entire biology, from their cold-blooded metabolism to their nesting habits, is ruled by temperature. For ages, the cold has been their northern wall, or so we thought, because that wall is starting to look less like a wall and more like a dotted line. Perhaps no single event shattered the image of the purely southern alligator more than the saga of Chance the Snapper. In July of 2019, reports began trickling in from Chicago's Humboldt Park. A 4 to 5 foot alligator was living in the lagoon. At first, it sounded like a joke. Chicago is hundreds of miles from the nearest native alligator habitat in southern Arkansas. But then came the videos. The reptile was real. Suddenly, a city known for its brutal winters was captivated by a swamp creature. The gator became an overnight celebrity. A local news outlet, Block Club Chicago, held a poll to name him, and Chance the Snapper, a nod to musician Chance the Rapper, won by a landslide. He inspired songs, t-shirts, and a whole lot of social media buzz. But as the spectacle grew, so did the concern. Experts warned that the animal was almost certainly an illegal pet that had been dumped and would never survive a Chicago winter. The city brought in a local expert from the Chicago Herpetological Society, affectionately known as Alligator Bob, to try and catch him. But Chance was surprisingly good at hide and seek. He dodged traps and seemed to be enjoying his time in the spotlight. Finally, the city called in a pro, Frank Robb, a professional alligator trapper from Florida. Robb's strategy was to create a zone of silence, asking officials to close a large section of the park to make the alligator feel less threatened. In the early morning hours of July 16th, after a week of national attention, Frank Robb successfully captured Chance the Snapper. He was found to be a healthy male, who was then sent to a new, permanent home at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm Zoological Park in Florida. But here's the wild part. He wasn't the first. As it turns out, Chicago has a weirdly long history with out-of-place alligators. Newspaper archives show reports of gators being pulled from Chicago waterways as far back as 1902 and again in 2008 and 2010. Chance was just the one who went viral and made the entire country look at the map and say, "Wait, what?" And the thing is, Chicago wasn't a one-off, not by a long shot. Once you start looking, you realize these northern gators are part of a bizarre and growing pattern. In February 2023, a 4-foot alligator was pulled from a lake in Brooklyn's Prospect Park. Some locals even nicknamed it Godzilla. City Parks officials said the animal was lethargic and suffering from cold shock, as it was completely unsuited for New York's winter. The immediate conclusion? an abandoned pet. This wasn't a first for the region either. Alligators have been found in Connecticut and under a car right in New York City. In Pennsylvania, a pet gator named Oscar went for a swim in the Susquehanna River before being recaptured. Another report from Kansas described a resident seeing an alligator in the road and thinking it had to be a prank, right up until it lunged at a police officer. There have been reports from Massachusetts, Indiana, and even as far north as Fargo, North Dakota. Each sighting on its own seems like a fluke, but when you put them all together, they paint a pretty strange picture. And in a second, I'm going to show you the real reason these gators keep turning up thousands of miles from home. Because the answer is stranger and more troubling than most people assume. If you're into wildlife mysteries like this, take a second to hit subscribe, because what we uncover next is exactly the kind of story you won't get anywhere else. So, this brings us back to the big question. How are all these alligators ending up so far from home? The answer for these headline-grabbing sightings in places like Chicago, New York, and Kansas isn't some great northern migration. It's much simpler, and in a way, more troubling. People put them there. The root of the problem is irresponsible owners in the exotic pet trade. A baby alligator is small, fascinating, and, for some people, an irresistible novelty. But that tiny gator doesn't stay tiny. It grows fast. A 4-foot alligator, like the one in Prospect Park, eventually becomes an 8-foot, several hundred-pound predator. It gets strong, dangerous, and expensive to care for. Faced with an animal they can't handle, many owners make a desperate and illegal choice. They dump it. A local park, a neighborhood pond, or a nearby river becomes the quietest solution. This is exactly what experts believe happened to Chance the Snapper and the Brooklyn alligator. A spokesperson for the New York City Parks Department put it perfectly after the Prospect Park incident. Parks are not suitable homes for animals, not indigenous to those parks, domesticated or otherwise. Releasing these animals isn't just illegal, it's cruel. The animal is often left to suffer in a climate it can't survive, and it poses a serious risk to the public and to local wildlife. But the dumped pet story isn't the only story. While a gator in a Chicago lagoon is almost certainly a released pet, something else seems to be happening along the established borders of their territory. And this involves a much slower, more profound force: a changing climate. Scientists and wildlife officials are noticing a subtle but measurable northward creep of the alligator's natural range. In North Carolina, which has always marked the northernmost edge of their territory, gators are being found slightly farther inland and up the coast than historical records would predict. Similarly, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency has noted that alligators appear to be naturally expanding their range into the state's western border along the Mississippi River, and they don't think it's just escaped pets. The key factor appears to be milder winters. Alligators can survive short cold snaps by entering a state called brumation, where they can rest at the water's surface with just their nostrils poking above the ice. As winters become less severe, the environmental barrier that once stopped them is becoming a little less formidable. It's absolutely critical to make the distinction here. The alligator found near a Walmart in Missouri is almost certainly an abandoned pet, but an alligator population surviving and possibly breeding a few miles farther north in a Carolina or Tennessee river system, that could be a sign of a climate-driven range expansion. One is a human problem we can tackle with better laws and education. The other is a long-term ecological shift with consequences we're just beginning to understand. The map of the American alligator we have in our heads is officially out of date. We once thought of them as animals confined to the southern swamps, but the reality is way more complicated. On one hand, we have a direct, human-caused problem of illegal pets being dumped hundreds of miles from home, creating shocking but isolated encounters. On the other, a warming climate may be slowly redrawing the alligator's ancestral boundaries, one mild winter at a time. These stories, from the celebrity saga of Chance the Snapper to the quiet scientific work of tracking populations in the Carolinas, prove one thing: our world, And the animals in it aren't as static as we might think. The southern alligator is on the move, and it leaves us with one lingering question: where will we see one next? But alligators aren't the only predator quietly redrawing the map. Right now, in the Florida Everglades, an invader far harder to catch is swallowing an entire ecosystem whole. And that's the video you need to watch next. Tap it on screen now, because once you see how far it's already spread, you'll never look at a swamp the same way again.